Okay, let me tell you a little bit about our guests here today. And I think there's a little bit more chocolate cake left, but you want that, it's unbelievable.
Save me some, I didn't get it.
It's really unbelievable. Janine Stange, she's a motivational speaker, she's a singer, and she's an on-air personality both in radio and TV, local, regional, as well as national. She's best known for her historic journey to sing the Star-Spangled Banner in each and every one of the 50 states, a mission she embarked on to honor our brave. Her story is the subject of a documentary entitled The National Anthem Girl, appropriately.
Captain Obvious name.
Right, and now streaming on Amazon Prime. She's been featured on every major television network and appeared on national news shows including The Today Show, Fox and Friends, NBC Nightly News, and Fox News at Night. And she also can be heard every Thursday morning on Sirius XM 60s on 6. Who listens to 60 on 6? It's great.
Anybody know Flash Phelps?
She's there with Flash.
Oh, okay.
Every Thursday morning. She also has spoken to and performed for groups across the country, ranging from Fortune 500 corporations to inner city public schools. And she really connects to people of all ages and backgrounds, providing a sense of citizenship, duty, and what service over self really means. She works closely with nonprofits that empower and give back to our military as well as their families. And in 2015, she became the first person to sing the national anthem every hour for 24 straight hours as part of an effort to raise funds for a military charity. After she did that, then she flew across the country to appear on TV the following morning.
I didn't realize that was in there. Okay.
It wasn't. In her keynote speech, Discover Your Mission, she takes the audience along on her journey through stories that are both comical and moving. She identifies pitfalls to goals and shares her life lessons that helped her navigate through and realize her 50-state goal. Ultimately, Janine helps others uncover their own unique life mission and activates them to, I love this, do what they do, what they can, with what they have. To do what they can with what they have, where they are. Pretty powerful. Janine, thank you for being here.
Thanks for having me.
You know, I gotta ask, 50 states, can you sing the national anthem for us?
Sure. You want to start out with that?
Everybody want to hear it? Let's stand, everybody.
Oh, say, can you see by the dawn's early light what so proudly we hailed at the twilight's last gleaming, whose broad stripes and bright stars through the perilous fight o'er the ramparts we watch were so gallantly streaming, and the rocket's red glare, the bombs bursting in air, gave proof through the night that our flag was still there. Oh, say does that star-spangled banner yet wave o'er the land of the free and the home of the brave?
Play ball! Wow, that was fantastic.
Just want to say thank you for your service. You were saluting, so I don't know if he's not. I can't see your tag. Steve, thank you for your service.
We have some other service people
And somebody
here too.
else was there? Oh, so somebody else was. You always know. It's not that difficult now, but I just.
Another one?
I sang for
Jack?
the Orioles, and they. Oh, who?
Jack.
Thank you. I sang for the Orioles the second to last game that the Yankees were playing. Derek Jeter's last game, sorry.
Wow.
That was in 2014, I think. And everybody was warning me, like, everybody's going to scream, oh.
So you were waiting for that, huh?
Yeah, I was ready. It didn't scare me.
I got to ask you, though. I've always wondered, have you ever forgotten the words when you're saying?
No. I sang it so many times that it became indelible. Like, in fact, it was a joke that I used to say that you could wake me up at 2 in the morning and I will sing the anthem. And then it happened because I sang on the hour every hour for a lacrosse game in Dana Point, California, and I did get to make sure I could sing it at 2 in the morning. So yes, I can.
You're tough. Every hour on the hour, then you flew overnight to New York?
To New York, yeah, it was an experience.
So you're not only a singer, but you're a businesswoman as well. I love your story. You know, your family owned a bagel shop. A lot of people here started out in small business. A lot of people still have small business. Some businesses are giant businesses now.
Yeah.
Tell us about that.
So I grew up on Long Island, and my dad was in construction when I was younger. And there was a bagel shop that was right down the road from us that we always went to. We loved it. And then one day it was closed. So my dad happened to have a conversation with a sheriff that closed the store. Apparently the owner was dealing drugs out of the back. And I mean, this is every stereotype there is, right? It was very profitable, off the books. Yeah, Bagel and Ashmira now, and it was called Bagels on the Terrace. And so the sheriff was like, you know, it's got all the equipment in the store still. So my dad came home, and the famous line that my mom would torture him with through the years, because they worked as well as I did, 70-hour weeks, was he came home and said, you know, it's got everything in it, it's not gutted, all the equipment's there. What could there possibly be to opening a bagel shop? Well, we learned. And you know, my mom ran the store, and my dad, he made the best bagels you've ever had. I could say that because people came all the way from Brooklyn to buy them. So you know they were legit. And they learned, they knew nothing. My mom never owned a business. My dad was in construction, and he thought he could still work construction. He would get in at 4 in the morning, put a bake up, take it out, she would work, and then after about a year or so, there was no way she could continue it on her own, so he came and they both did it full time. And then, of course, me, my brother Fred, and my cousin Vinny.
Cousin Vinny.
You shouldn't be, so you have a cousin Vinny?
The movie, My Cousin Vinny.
Yeah, I know it's the movie, but you shouldn't be. You probably have a cousin Vinny too.
I do have a cousin Vinny.
And I gotta tell you, they used to call my dad Meat Hooks. He was in, yeah. But anyhow, point is that we owned this bagel shop, and it was a very interesting lesson. I tell people that own their own businesses, if you're looking for, and you're a corporate, what is your actual title?
Whatever. Organizational.
Therapist, organizational.
You know, we'd like to know what we're
Got to spill the beans here, huh?
Okay. But I tell people all the time, you want to really know, like, find people that worked in retail with food. Because the only thing a lot of times, I was a kid, I was 9 years old, God only knows what, you know, Italian, you don't care about child labor laws or anything. So I worked, and the funny thing about it was, a lot of times, when I got old enough, my mom said then I could wait on customers. Otherwise, I was just bagging and cleaning, a lot of cleaning. But really, the only thing that stood between this huge construction guy and his egg sandwich was me. And if I didn't get it right, this was not during the era we're in now, where you can't, who said like happy holidays, I don't mean to insult you, whatever. I mean, I would get like the food thrown at me if I put ham instead of bacon. You know, all these things would happen. But you had to learn, even though my mom would basically, you know, rip the guy apart for doing that to a kid. You still had to smile, you still had to deal with all that. And we also learned the buck stopped with us, because every weekend, every holiday, every summer vacation, and snow day, we were all up at the crack of dawn, working. And if an employee called up and said that they didn't feel well, guess who got the call? Janine, get in, you know, and I had to go work. So the ownership mentality that kind of forged within us was priceless, because I really got to learn something that I've seen a lot of people don't have, an ownership mentality. It's always, well, somebody figure that out. Whereas somebody who grew up working like that would have to say, well, I have to figure it out, otherwise, how am I going to go to college?
In your talks, we were talking also as well, you talk about the lessons
Yes.
you learned from your mother,
Yeah.
particularly. You talked about one of them in terms of discipline that you
Yeah.
just referenced.
She had some funny lines, and what was really funny, this is not a total backstory, but when I finished the journey and I started to think about, now I could talk about some of the things, it kind of fell into it. And I was asked to give a talk, and I was thinking, I got to talk all about my journey, and then my husband actually said, you should really talk about your mom, because every day I have something to say about what she would always say about something. In fact, today makes 8 years she passed away. And the lessons that she taught, I used to hate growing up, but they really came in handy for when I was going to sing the anthem in all 50 states. But some of the things that she used to say, the first thing that we heard ad nausea was, if there was somebody in the store that was working for us that was kind of like doing nothing, slacking off, she had a TV monitor in the back, so you would literally hear, hey, you got time to lean? You got time to clean. And she would walk up to the front, and she had a stack of index cards. She had one detailed for every stinking chore in that store. But what I found was, health inspectors would come in to eat in our store. They wouldn't eat anywhere else, but they loved my mom because she was that nuts and clean. But the systems and the structure that I learned from that became very handy, because I know I'm at a table with some creatives. Any other creatives aside from my friend over here? Right? Sometimes you come up with all these great ideas, you get all these concepts, maybe an idea for a book or a new thing that you want to do for your business, and you don't have the systems and structure in place to kind of support those ideas. And that was my life for a very long time. I was going off on different rabbit trails, and didn't have that until I started to use what she did. She just basically said, when your mind wants to take a vacation, fine, go for it, but take an index card and read it so you know what to do next. And that was lesson one. The other one was, we had a lot of younger employees, and for some reason my mom was like, oh, she was like the organizational psychologist. They would all come to her for advice, and she'd listen to them, and she'd say, I'm going to tell you one thing now, because they were all about to get into some kind of relationship or whatever, and she'd say, now listen, establish your standards before you get into any kind of situation where you might compromise. Because if you compromise your values, it may seem okay for a little while, but you will ultimately lose. And it's so important from a company perspective. We all establish our mission statements, right? Or, what are our core values, whether it's in your your entire company or even just in certain departments. If you start to veer from that, you're just going to go all over the place. And when I was on my 50-state journey, little background, I was always pursuing a career in music and singing. And when I decided to do this 50-state journey, I did not want to screw up. And I'd always remember my mom, she would say this to me for guys I would date, compromise your values, you're gonna lose. So with this, I said, my mission is just to use my voice to honor our nation's heroes. And at the beginning, nobody was coming up to me with opportunities, but towards the end of it, when there was a lot of PR around it, people had some other ideas. Oh, you should do this, do this, do this. But I would always go, hold on, that looks really nice. It's a fun, shiny object. But does it line up with my mission? Does it have to do with veterans, the military? If it doesn't, I actually said no to things, which is probably hard for all of us in this room, but I did. The other lesson is she had said, never let him see you sweat. And I used to say, you got that from a deodorant commercial.
But it works.
But what I realized about that was, now you guys all open, how many people have just started their own, on your own business? Not, okay. So towards the end, maybe when you started to realize a lot more success, or now in the position you are, you got a lot of friends, a lot of people want to hang out with you. But in the beginning, did you have anybody around you? when you had to work 28,000 hours, you know. And for me, towards the end, everybody was pretty confident in me. For the first about 47 states, people thought I was nuts. But the whole never let them see you sweat thing was keep moving in spite of the fears and the doubts that you have, and realize that they're always going to be there. So for me, I just kept putting one foot in front of the other. And the interesting thing about that concept is you are going to sweat, but the point is to never externalize it with a lot of action that is going to be negative for you.
Let's talk a little bit more about that. Obviously, you have a fantastic voice. I mean, it was a tremendous rendition. But how did you get into singing? When did you discover that?
Funny. I was the shyest kid you'd ever met. And I would sing in the bagel shop. We had a walk-in refrigerator. I'd shut the door and I'd sing. One time, my parents also opened up a gift shop, and I thought I was in the store alone, and I was singing Somewhere Over the Rainbow. And some guy walked up, because he was apparently in the back looking at cards, and I was like, I was mortified, because I was so shy. I got into, the first time I ever sang the anthem in public was, ironically, the national anthem. And I always say this when I give my motivational talks, I wish I had a better story. But when I held on to the microphone to start to sing the anthem, I was clenching on it so tightly. When I finished, my mom was sitting in the front row. This was a homecoming basketball game. I walked over to her. I couldn't open my hand. It was literally stuck. And thankfully, I had parents who taught me to go towards what is most fearful. I said this to you, like not towards, cars in the street, but to the things that you're experiencing the most resistance. And I don't know if anybody has this book by Steve Pressman, The Art of War. Not the War of, no, it's called The War of Art. It's the flip of, what's the real book? Okay, so it's The War of Art. He talks all about resistance and knowing that on the opposite side of what the resistance is, the bigger the resistance is, there could be something on the other side that is really, really meant for you. That's why it's there so much, because inside of you, you know. And so I did, and I just sang it every chance I got. It was horrendous. Thank God that, there's no such thing as VHS players anymore, because there were a lot of videotapes that my dad took of me, and oh my God, it was bad. So it had a lot to do with, I got into singing because I was on purpose trying to overcome a fear. And I just then started to record albums, and one thing led to another.
And what got you started on the every state type of a thing? I mean, how did that start out, and then how did it become a life of its own?
Yeah, that had a lot to do with, I was out in LA, and so I had moved out. Imagine an Italian family, a girl saying they're going to move across the country. That did not go over well. But I went over there because I had recorded a couple albums in New York, did a lot of the stuff, kind of was doing my own business, like booking my stuff, everything. And then had an opportunity to record another album in LA. This might shock some of you. The Hollywood producer that I worked with was a total con artist. I know that's hard to believe in Hollywood. And I spent all the money. I was selling mortgages, and I socked away so much money, because again, Italian girl, you don't move out of the house, so I was living at home, saving a lot of money, and spent it all on this guy who was, I hope this is not available to the public, but he totally screwed me over. So I got out into Long Island, out of Long Island to go start to that career. And it was just in the middle of the time when the music industry on its own was tanking, just like the mortgage industry was tanking. And all the A&R people, I developed all these relationships, and you don't shoot your shot until you got something good. So I was convinced with this new producer that this was going to be the album that's going to put me on the top. I'm going to have a show on MTV Cribs, the whole thing. No. I always tell people, I thought I was going to record the album, get a deal, go on tour, bing, bang, boom. I was going to be there for 3 months, and 3 months turned into 5 years.
Wow. And
then out of that horrible time of me realizing I had no money, is in this ton of debt, what can I do? And there was something that happened because the career was not going well, but my mom had passed away, and I started to realize and come to grips with a when-then statement that I always would have. And I would always say, when I make it big, then I'll give back. And I started to realize, well, wow, my mom had a lot of when-then statements, and she was 59 years old, and she never got to do anything with them. And I used to think, well, what does actually when I make it big even mean? And I talk a lot about when-then statements in my talks, and I say the best or the worst kind of when-then statement is when your when is extremely ambiguous. When I make it big, when I'm the biggest, venture capitalist firm in Baltimore, or when, trying to remember, the biggest law firm, the big, whatever that thing is that, what does that really mean? Can you check that off? No. But we stay trapped in these comfort zones because it sounds good. When I make it big, then I give back. People thought I was so noble, but really I was procrastinating. So the 50-state concept came from me kind of like being gutted and saying, like, what can I do now with what I have where I am? And I realized I sang the anthem in a few states, and I did what we all do when we want to do real research, and I Googled if anybody ever sang in all 50 states, and nobody had. So then I just, at the time when I realized that would be something really cool to do, I just said, I'll just meander through the country. When I get enough money, I'll go do an anthem and blah, blah, blah. They don't pay you to sing the anthem. And then I realized, funny enough, I had been visiting at the time. He was my boyfriend here in Maryland. I was shutting the trunk of his car and saw starspangled200.com. You guys have those license plates? I had no idea what, I was like, what? I thought anything about to do with a Star Spangled Banner was me. I'm like, what the heck, a license plate? So I remember walking from his car with my phone, Googling it, and went, oh, the national anthem is turning 200.
Opportunity knocks.
In September, this was January. So I said, now I had been through about 24 states, and then I realized I needed to really light a fire and figure out how I was going to actually pay to get through now, because initially it was just whenever. Then I was like, okay. So I put together a crowdfunding campaign, and I started to just zip up all my social media and make sure it was all a concentrated effort, and then I got on Fox News and then launched my crowdfunding campaign. 6 o'clock in the morning, 7 o'clock I was on air, and I was able to raise enough money not to fly private, but to eke right to the end of my journey. So that's how the idea came, and it came from a paradigm shift. I think I'm cutting ahead in your things. But it came from a paradigm shift of stopping myself in this pattern that I had of, oh, just because I was a good singer, I have to be on some world tour. But I wasn't being myself. I was trying to emulate other people. But when I stopped and took a look outside of these comfort zones that I constructed for myself, creativity was able to be that creativity was actually able to flow.
Did you ever think about getting a sponsor?
I tried. Oh God, I tried. In fact, that's what kept me for a very long time sputtering, because for the first year I was so busy making sponsor decks. I had pitched a reality show to the executive director and producer of Project Runway, because I lived in LA, and Undercover Boss, you might know that one.
Oh, yeah.
He loved the idea. Sat in his office. I was like, oh, he loves it. He goes, but nobody knows who the heck you are. He goes, if you could get me a sponsor and, get all these events, he goes, then I'll do it. I was like, if I could get a sponsor, what the heck do I need? What do I need you for? So I just said, you know what? It was actually my husband. Well, I wasn't married at the time, but I remember him and I used to have these conversations. He's the founder of Inside Lacrosse, if any of you like lacrosse. So he was always good to throw things up against and talk. We would only talk marketing stuff, and he goes, you just need to do it. You just need to become the national anthem girl. And I was like, well, but I got to get money. He goes, no, you don't. Just start. And that's something that obviously all of you, you're CEOs of companies, you know how to start. But you got to deal always with the fears and the doubts of doing that and the rejection, because I got hung up on a lot of times, trying to book myself.
There's a lot of rejection that you go through without a doubt. But talk a little bit about the documentary. I mean, it's streaming now on Amazon Prime.
Yeah.
And
it was a pretty crazy story. It actually happened when I was halfway through my journey. I was on national news talking about this, and you get some crazy things, like when you're on national news, like crazy people writing you. But this one guy seemed pretty normal. He said, I saw you on TV, and my wife and I have a film company. So you look like you don't have any professional footage. I was literally throwing my phone to somebody that looked trustworthy in the crowd and saying, can you film this? Half the time they didn't know how to push the button to record. Other times they filmed themselves. Yeah. So he came, he said, listen, if you can sing for the Louisville Bats in Kentucky, I will come with my wife and a film crew and we'll document it. I was like, okay, cool. He's like, so you can have some footage.
Awesome.
So we did that, and he was proved to be a normal guy. His wife, I love her. I love them to this day. And they said, well, that was my 47th state, so it was towards the end. And they said, my last state, God bless you, my last state was Tennessee, so it was pretty close by. They said, we'll come again. We'll come and film the 50th state. So I said, okay. So they did. And then 2 years later, they called me and said, is anybody optioned to do your story? No, why, you know? And they said, if you could get us all of your interview footage, and this took me 3 months, get everything from your Facebook page, take every photo, everything, every story, record yourself telling me everything about everything. I will come up with, you know, I will put a documentary together. Wow. In July this year, it came out. It's on, we got copies in the back, but it is on Amazon Prime. It was just amazing to see that somebody else kind of took this, because there was so many good stories that came out of it, and for somebody to take the care to make sure also that it lined up with my mission. I said, I do not want this political. I do not want this to have anything but the heart and soul of what I saw of America. And they accomplished that, and I'm very grateful for that.
You know, you talk about a paradigm shift, you know,
Yeah.
and it's so ironic, and I'm sure we've all experienced it. You know, you're driving and driving towards a goal, and sometimes you can't see what's going on either side of you because you got blinders on. But it's not until you reflect back that really success starts to come, and you realize what your mission is. What was the one moment? What was when you had the paradigm shift, you were able to stop and take a turn, and that's when success came? What was the moment?
When I was about state 20, which was Alabama, I remembered I was thinking all the time, one of the other lessons that my mom used to always say was, don't just say you care, show you care. She had a huge heart for the military. Somebody came in the store in uniform, she made him feel like $1 million. And I watched that. She never told me, now you gotta respect the military, and our first response, it was just something I saw her do. And I always would think of that, what she had said. And I said, you know, I'm singing the anthem in every state. It was my way of thinking like I was doing something, you know, at the time it was this great thing. And I said, I'm singing that I care, but how can I really show I care? And I just started, because I owned a printing and design company. That's how I kind of kept myself afloat. I was telling you, I would literally be doing client jobs while I was walking onto the plane, because at the time I couldn't afford to get Wi-Fi connection, so I'd be like doing it. And God bless my business partner, she just like put up with this. I would be like, I was at the Cincinnati Red games, I had just sang, and she's like, we have an emergency client needs to. So I was sitting at the table signing autographs and doing work. But at state 20, because I was like, okay, this is nice, but what else can I do? I just had a table. I just asked for a table at the events, and I printed up these cards. I designed and printed these thank you notes that were blank, and I invited people after every event to write a letter of gratitude to somebody they never met, but who had written a blank check, giving up to including their life for our freedom.
Wow.
And it was at that moment that I saw kids who looked like punks on the surface. When they found out that this was for somebody in the military, they'd kneel down on concrete, writing a note. Their faces went from I'm a tough kid to somebody who had been aware that they were touching the life of somebody who was keeping them free to go and do whatever it is that they wanted to do with their dreams in their life. And I realized how much that meant to me. Didn't care about making it big. What I loved as the journey went on is I was like, collecting thousands and thousands of these notes that went into military care packages. And that was, for me, the shift when I realized I could do more just by giving people an opportunity to take a minute. And that was, for me, when I realized when you really eliminate those boundaries, those self-inflicted boundaries, or the things that people, maybe somebody said something to you when you were a kid growing up and you just thought that was the truth and it really wasn't. When you eliminate that and see things for what they are, you know, sometimes we get so concerned about the order of things, like this has to happen, then this. And I always say we're always concerned about putting the cart before the horse. Some of us got to check to make sure the horse isn't dead. And
so it really was a function of giving back.
Yeah.
It seemed that was really the catalyst for you.
it allowed me to see beyond myself. I think that was what was important for me.
Remarkable. I'm going to open up to questions from the audience here. How much have you raised? Do you know how much you have raised for the military in terms of?
I don't know, but I will say this. What I did start was something called Janine's team. In fact, I have cards, I'll tell you guys in a minute, where I never liked to ask people for money for giving, because I always saw sometimes there were charities that I couldn't always trust, and I didn't want to attach my name to anything that turned out to be like a sham. So I would ask people for their time. So I have this thing called Janine's team. A lot of companies have gotten involved with it, individuals, schools, where they take a couple of minutes and they write a card to a veteran who is struggling. His wife just passed away. Right now, our mission this month until the end of the year is I found an organization called Veteran Last Patrol, and they have veterans who visit veterans in hospice who have little to no family. So we've literally collected thousands of cards from people all over the country and gifts so that they go without, you know, their hands aren't empty when they go and visit them. So as far as money, I can't tell you, but I can say it's been priceless to see the things that have come out of this Janine's team thing. And I started all of that because of a guy named Cliff. He was a 92-year-old World War II veteran. He stormed Normandy on D-Day.
Oh my God.
He's in Kentucky. Thankfully, the film crew was there to cover this, so when you watch the documentary, you could see him. And what I learned what he did, he sat there and he told me, 92 years old, every morning he'd read the obituaries. And whenever he saw there was a fellow veteran who passed on, he'd find their names, call the families, total strangers than anybody he knew, and he would offer to give their eulogy.
Wow.
And what I found is he is, in my opinion, one of the best examples of somebody doing, and this, I wish I came up with this quote, but it's not, it's a Theodore Roosevelt quote, somebody just doing what they could with what they had from where they were. And I decided to start that team, Janine's team, because I was like, well, I got this platform now, a big social media following, I've got national news, what can I do with what I have where I am? I know, I don't have to ask for money, I'll just make people send me stuff, and now I look like a mailing center in my basement. But.
I think you might have some potential other team members. How many people have been in Normandy? Janine just talked about.
Oh.
Probably one of the most moving places you ever seen in your life. I mean, the hill was literally almost like a 90-degree hill, and the enemy had cannons inside that hill. And it's like how anybody ever made it. Have you been there?
No.
It's like unbelievable that anybody made it up that hill. And they were just, you know, they were just fodder. I mean, it was like shooting people in I mean, it just boggles your mind. So anybody that fought at Normandy and stayed alive, I mean, it's unbelievable. And for the guys that are, and gals that I guess are old enough, and we remember the Vietnam days, you know, when the soldiers came back and they were spat upon. I mean, it's an unbelievable thing. And to see the total turn of events now where they're revered, I mean, we thank people for their service. I mean, it's a wonderful, wonderful thing.
I had a woman reach out to me. She said, she had seen me speak at an event, and she said, can you, my husband served in Vietnam, and you know, he was spit on, something, and she said he doesn't really speak about his service, but maybe if I give you some information about him, could your people send send birthday cards to him and welcome him home? So she took a picture, and he was wiping a tear from his eye, but he had this mound of cards sitting on his dining room table. And to me, that's what giving back is all about. Just you, again, looking around in your own company, in your own environment, and saying, what can I do? You don't know, just by Cliff, that 92-year-old World War II veteran, telling me he did that, I was compelled, like, I cannot just go away from this mission and not continue to see what I can do. And we do an annual Medal of Honor mail call. I have people from all over the country, they adopt a Medal of Honor recipient, and then I hand deliver them mail call style to the recipients during their annual luncheon. and we collected over 12,000 cards. And a lot of them write back, which is, it's like forget about like Oscar winners, like you get a letter from a Medal of Honor recipient. It's pretty legit. Yeah.
Barbara, you had a question?
I did, 2 questions. At the risk of not being too personal,
Yeah.
I'm curious, your mom's name?
Oh, Patty.
Patty. I love hearing the story, the impressions that you, and I love your accent. Great Long Island. When you speak of her, and as parents, it's always interesting to
Yeah.
hear the impression that someone has left on your life. So that's fascinating.
Yeah.
Thank you. And I was also trying to get a little bit more information about what's next for you. These are some pretty impressive goals and things that you may happen. Is there a clear direction or goal in mind with Janine's team? Or
Yeah.
anything else?
I think it was because of Cliff, actually, that I started speaking. Because I asked him, and you could watch this in the movie, I said, what would your advice be to young Americans? And he said, like he was waiting for this question, and we got it on film, he said, tell them this is your land. Love it, live in it, and protect it. And one day I was driving, and I was leaving Palm Desert in California, and I was like thinking of those 3 things that he said, and I was like, that's not as simple as it sounds. Loving it, even though you may not like it, means that you're 100% there, despite people's differences. Living on it means taking responsibility, and protecting means keeping it from becoming something it wasn't meant to be, aside from what our armed forces do. And I was like, I got it. And I found out he passed in 2016. I was like, I have to. He asked me to give this advice, and what am I going to do? Oh, that's nice, thanks. So I started speaking. I started in schools, and then I realized that I love speaking in schools, but I also realized there were a lot of adults that really needed to hear some things where they could maybe make a course correction. What I talk about is not like, rocket science. I tell people all the time, if you're looking for that, wrong place. But I hope always that my talks, I speak at a lot of companies, a lot of associations, and I've realized my mom always wanted to write a book. And as much as I was like 29,000 words into a book one day, I said, well, my mom's not going to read this because she's not here, and the only 2 people left are my mother-in-law and my aunt. They'd read it. I don't know if anybody reads books anymore like this. And I didn't know the documentary was going to be made, so I was like, oh, cool, I got that. But what I felt was if I could be that book for my mom and what she wanted to teach people, because I do say this a lot. I ask people when I'm in my talks if any of them have kids. Any of you guys here have kids?
Yep.
Oh, see, a lot of you and most of the places they're like, and I'm always like, it's not a bad thing if you have kids. But what I do say is, do they ever make you feel like you're talking to a brick wall? Well, for you, and maybe this is for you today, keep talking. Because as much as my mom thought I was not listening to her, and boy, oh boy, did I seem like I was a brick wall, I was listening. And everything she told me, it was like she was coaching me all along that 2-year journey. I could hear her voice, like, Mickey in the Rocky sequence. I really did, and I always feel like, especially too, I understand a parent owning their own business. She was working. I one time went downstairs. I was in elementary school, and they made us take a thing, like, how long does your parents work? How many hours do your parents work? And I was like running downstairs, like, do you know how many hours you work? She's like, do not tell me. 70 hours a week, and she still made me feel like I was her kid. It wasn't like, you're just come on, what do you want? And it wasn't easy for her. But I listened, more importantly, I watched. And even though she didn't know how much I'd end up being so much like her, ask my husband, everything in the refrigerator is all lined up, the labels are all on the front. That was how she was.
He's not Italian, what do you expect? Any other questions?
Yeah.
Thank you for what you're doing. What's your singing, like, where is that in your career?
First, does everybody notice we correlate each other? I did not put a blue shirt, I have a white one. What's funny is I was so obsessed with being a singer, and I love singing. But this sort of became something now where I feel like I could sing 3 minutes, and hopefully people interpret that, what a song I wrote, well. But the speaking has really been what I love doing. I mean, I would love to do more, I always have wanted to have a show where I can kind of go throughout America and show people who kind of are living in echo chambers on one side of the world or another, or in their own world, and show just how beautiful Americans really are. I got to meet so many of them, and I've always kind of thought I could go like do extreme home makeover for veterans and get the communities involved. That was kind of my thing that I want to do. So yeah, I mean, the singing side is sort of, I don't know, the music industry doesn't really entice me anymore.
No American Idol or?
Yeah, thank God that was, no, I didn't do that.
Mike?
You mentioned that you didn't want your story to be political, which I find pretty unbelievable these days. In your travels, has that approach you've taken been challenged? And how do you deal with it?
Well, Sports Illustrated had called me when the protests were at their peak, and I didn't return their call because I wanted to stay true to my mission. I wasn't trying to make a political statement. What I was doing, even though the song has been politicized, the heart of my mission was to honor those people who could be in a foxhole with a different belief system and different voting, outcomes. But I just wanted to promote the genuine love for something, for the people that our veterans are protecting and believing in something bigger than themselves. So my thing was always, I respect it. Listen, a veteran, I think it's more important for a veteran to answer that question than somebody like me, because they're fighting for your freedom. They're fighting for your freedom of speech, and that's fine. I was approached a number of times. I had some people on national talk shows wanting me to go on, and no, I don't care. Even though it was a huge opportunity, sorry, that's not my thing. So.
Stay true to your mission.
So not that I want to change your mission, but one thing that I see you doing is identifying the good in this country.
Yeah.
So thank you for that. And if there's anything that you would ever expand on your mission, it could be that.
I like that.
Identifying all the good that's still in this country.
Yeah, and I've gotten to see, just through the Janine's team efforts, the people that have just, I have pictures of this one woman, they do a cookie exchange, and she brought cards to that cookie exchange, and they all were writing things. I've had people knitting Afghans, lap blankets for hospice vets. These are people that are the heart and soul of this country, and it makes you stop when you're so busy, and say, wait a second, there's a human being. Some of you guys are CEOs. Some people, your employees, maybe don't even think you're human, but you got stuff going on in your life too.
Very true.
How many people were on the Janine team?
I've got over 1,700, but I don't advertise it to just be like a man. I want the people that are actually gonna do something. And as everybody knows, there's percentages, only a certain percentage open the mail every time. Seems like everybody loves the Medal of Honor mail call because it's like writing like an Oscar winner. But I always like to try to emphasize the Vietnam veteran, who's kind of alone and that doesn't share his journey so much, or the hospice vets. I think all the recipients, Medal of Honor recipients, would be like, yeah, write those people. So yeah, but I've had companies. I've had the entire call center for Delta write a huge box of thank you notes that came in. So companies can do this, and since I live here, and they could do this as a project together. And learning about these selfless sacrifices, just these people, and taking a minute, is, to me, it builds culture in the company.
Anybody else? Question for Janine? Steve.
You said you mentioned your husband runs Inside Lacrosse?
He's the founder. I think it's Terry Foy's. Yeah.
Wonderful. Did
Yeah.
you play lacrosse in high school?
I did not. I didn't even know. I lived on Long Island. I did not know the difference between a point and a goal. But I took a job with, actually first I was a recruiter. I was calling into a company, and this woman, her name was B, she answered, and she's like, what are you doing as a recruiter? I need whatever. And it ended up that she worked for the New York Saints on the side, inside lacrosse. And I was like, wait a second, that's a sports team? What is lacrosse? So do they sing the anthem before their games?
Always an opportunity.
So I recruited myself. I remember running across to Nassau Coliseum, and I ended up singing for the Islanders and the New York Saints. And I met a guy that said, you know, there's this new outdoor team coming called MLL. And I was like, well, did they start with the anthem? So I went and interviewed with Lacrosse Unlimited, were the owners. I don't know if you know Lacrosse Unlimited, but at the time, it was before the game, before the league ever started. I was on the ground floor. I actually have a championship ring from the Lizards, but I interviewed with the guy. I said, listen to me. His name was Joe. I said, I know nothing. I'll sell. I'll do PR, whatever you want. Ended up doing both. And I said, if you let me sing the anthem at all your games. And he said, well, I can't guarantee all of them. I'm like, well, everyone that, you know, there's not anybody to do it. So I started singing the anthem at lacrosse games, and then ended up meeting my husband. But that's the only way I knew anything about it.
Have you done hockey?
Yeah. Yeah. I've done pretty much every sport, including donkey basketball. You watch the movie.
Is that a new sport? I haven't heard
It's
of
West
that.
Virginia. It's a big deal.
Chris,
Is there any particular stage that in the next 5 years that, or 10 years, that you want to be on to sing the anthem that you just haven't done, or is there a certain?
You know, I mean, you could look at it from two ways. I don't seek out like singing at like sporting events anymore. I think it's great. I mean, I've sung for NASCAR. I've sung at the Ravens Stadium. I've sung literally everywhere. I don't necessarily have one of those like, oh my God, I want to do that, just because I think for me it's a moment where it's not about me. It's about leading people and singing that song. One of the most memorable times I sang was at a smaller type of venue. But in the beginning, when I first started out, I'd sing it like I was hoping that there was some executive in the audience, so I would do all these vocal acrobats. Everybody's like, what the heck is she singing? Is this still the anthem? And what changed that for me was a guy. I was walking off the stage. I stuck to the melody that time, shocking. And he was a decorated veteran, and he had a tear in his eye, and he said, thank you for singing it the way it was meant to be sung.
wow.
And I was like, oh, this is not about me, is it? So I don't necessarily, these opportunities do come to me, but I'm not like, oh, please, I would love that exposure. It's not that way anymore. It used to be. Yeah.
Anybody else? One last question I have. You learned all those lessons from your mom. How about your brother? What's he doing now?
He's a dentist. He is right near the UN, so he's the Qatar, the princess has her, she only wants him to work on her teeth, and she was pregnant, so they sent a private jet to have him work on her teeth. He's really, my brother and I are very, very close, and he's 3 years older than me, so he was always in college. He was always a couple steps ahead. My cousin Vinny and I kind of were in the trenches together. But from my brother, I think he is one of the most humble, kind people. I'm rough. He's just gentle, and I think that's got very good bedside manners. So, you know, I'm very fortunate. Sometimes when you realize, when you've lost so much, you realize how important the little things are.
Great book, The Gentle Italian. I would like that.
Oh, is there
Everybody,
such a
Janine
thing?
Stange, thank you so much.